Hey guys, normally you get your takeaways at the end of a video. This is really important to me, so I actually want to open up with this. If you are having any troubles or any concerns or any doubts regarding your mental health or someone you cares about, please see someone about it. Please talk to your GP, ask to go on a mental health plan, and please do something about it. Very, very important. If you think you have these doubts and you think it might not be enough of a problem, you might not be bad enough, don't let those thoughts get in the way. Please see someone about it. I spent so long thinking that my problems weren't bad enough. Honestly, I could have lost everything with that. So please see someone. Also, if someone you care about is acting strange or different, they're not doing what they would normally do, they've stopped talking to people, or they've stopped seeing everyone, or they're just acting different, please ask them about it. They might not realize that something is wrong themselves until it gets brought up to their attention. Please lend that hand. Please get them on that right track. Thank you. Now, let's go into the video. My name is Chris. For most of my life, I've realized I've been unhappy. This is how I'm trying to make the change. Video 4, all fucked up, my mental health. Hey guys, thanks for checking out what is my fourth and final video planned in my little series about my year of development that I've had so far. This one here is going to be a little bit, I guess, serious and dark compared to my last couple, because I'm going to be talking strictly about my mental health journey. Now, again, I need to make it clear that this is just what I've gone through, what's happened in my life and how I feel. This might not apply to everyone, but I also feel it applies to a lot more people than what they themselves will realize. As you guys know, in the last year, I've worked really hard on losing my weight, feeling better about myself, getting healthier, and into that year, I also realized I needed to start doing something about my mental health. I never realized I had a problem until it got so bad that I was effectively destroying parts of my own life. And then when I looked back on it, I eventually realized I've been doing that for a long, long time in my life. So, how did I get there? What did I realize? And what am I doing about it? Let's start at the beginning. A happy life. I'll say it right now, guys, I've got a great life. I live with a wonderful partner, my fiance Kat. Literally today, we went to a jeweler to design our wedding rings, and that's happening very soon. I'm so excited about that. We live in a wonderful place. We've got wonderful cats. I love my job. I work with great people and a great supportive family. Honestly, you look at me and I've got it all, and that's a very wanky thing to say, and it sounds like an arrogant thing to say, but things are awesome. Going through school, I had a pretty decent sized friendship group. I actually had a couple friendship groups. So much of us have stayed in contact through this time that we've always had each other's back. I've lived with a couple mates. I've now lived with my partner. I've always had steady work. I'm planning to get married soon. Things are good. I'd always be that guy that was always loud and vibrant and making a fool of himself when we were out. I was a very outgoing person. My whole life was surrounded by people that would always be together, doing things together. There was never really that sense of doing nothing. I like to feel that I've always been that sort of person, that if someone's going through a hard time, I would always be there to lend an ear and give whatever advice I could give. Even if that advice was as simple as, hey, you should see someone about this. At no stage when I was living this life did I ever realize, hey, I probably could have used this advice. I probably should have taken this advice. But you'd look at me and how I'd look at me and think, what have I got to complain about? This is great. I'm actually happy. Also, I thought, reality, the person behind the mask. You see, it's very easy to look happy. It's very easy to come across as the guy without a care in the world. It's very easy to give off that air of you've got it all, especially when you go out of your way to ignore those things that are actually bringing you down. When I don't mean ignore, I don't mean just pushing through it and be great. I mean not even realizing that they're there, but not actually doing anything about it because you don't know they're there. Because you're not aware of exactly how bad things are actually getting. You live your life in denial, and then suddenly it all just builds up. It gets worse and worse. And then suddenly you start having a couple extra bad days. You start thinking things are getting tougher. You start realizing, hey, this is a problem, but you put it aside. You come across a moment in your life that is tragic and life-changing, and all you worry about at that point in time is, when can I get back to being that happy person? So instead of doing anything about it, instead of realizing that you might have a problem here, you just put it behind you. You just add it to the pile of things that aren't in your way. And then you just keep going and you do nothing about it. It eventually gets to a point where that pile can no longer be out of the way. But you know what? Don't worry about it. I'm going to be happy. I'm that happy guy. I don't want to not be that guy that everyone thinks is going to light up the room. I don't want to be that person who brings the mood down because of his problems. In fact, in my mind, I wasn't that guy. In my mind, I was only that happy guy. So there's no way I could have these problems. Because even when the worst things have happened to me, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, but other people have it so much worse. So that can't be me. But then eventually it gets worse and worse and worse until you start realizing this day is going to be a tough day. Then the next day, you realize before you've even woken up, this is going to be a tough day. Then those days get worse and worse and worse. Those pile of shit gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you realize not only is today going to be a rough day, you don't even know when the next day that isn't going to be a rough day is. You wake up thinking, I can't wait for this day to be over. But despite that fact, you know that when you wake up the next day, it's probably going to be the same shit. I'd wake up wanting that day to be over, but I wouldn't want the next day to begin, because all I knew was when I wake up on the outside, despite all these great things that are going my way, I've only got more shit to add to that pile. And eventually the pile of shit in my life drastically outweighs the pile of things I look forward to in life. And then that just makes it harder. But the problem is, as this pile was building up, I still didn't realize there was a problem. Even when I was waking up thinking, I do not want to do today, I still didn't think my problems were bad enough. I still didn't think I had a problem. And trust me, that shit just gets worse. Trauma. When did it get this bad? Was it always this bad? These are things that I genuinely didn't actually think about in my life. I never knew that these were a problem because I refused to acknowledge that it was a problem. But then when I finally realized that there was a problem, I stepped back and actually had to think about it. And it turns out it goes back further than I ever imagined. And I really fucking wish someone had said something about it way back then, because who knows how different life could have been back then. Childhood. When we moved to Adelaide, we lived in a wonderful house in Ingle Farm, and our next door neighbour was a wonderful family whose 2 kids were the same age as my oldest brother Ryan and older sister Ashley. So our 2 families were pretty heavily involved. So there'd be a lot of overlap where we'd have a dinner at one of their houses and there was a lot of people, including like the neighbour's oldest son's group of friends and my brother's group of friends. With that, there was always a few people on that neighbour's brother's group of friends side that for some reason really latched onto the idea of picking on me. Now, these guys were about 7 years older than me and would basically think it was fucking hilarious to pick on me by calling me a girl, till the point that I would get upset and start crying, and then make fun of me for crying, calling me a baby, a girl, basically giving me shit for showing any form of emotion because I'm just a girl. I basically didn't know how to respond to this, because at this stage, just to give an idea, I'm like 7 or 8 when this is happening, still trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. So that was good. And I, of course, denied that that shit ever happened. I never spoke to my parents or even their neighbour's parents about it, and basically spent a big part of that childhood thinking, I show emotion, I'm a girl. And then that is the worst thing I could have been called. Going through school, I had a couple groups of friends. I had some of the, you call it the nerdy or the geekier friends that would spend the whole day in the library playing card games. Nothing wrong with that. I fucking loved every moment of it. I then had the other group of friends who were the more sport group, where we'd go out and play handball or footy, and that's how we spent our recess lunches. And throughout a lot of school, I'd go between the two. Unfortunately, I hate to say this about myself, but as I got older and older, even though I loved those group of people I'd play in the library with, and I loved those games we were playing, in my head, I started thinking that this shit got a bit nerdy. I know that's awful, and I really wish I didn't go through that, but it basically led to me hanging out with those people less and less because I didn't want to be seen as a library nerd. Now, first off, I 100% was a library nerd, and 2, there was nothing wrong with that. These were a bunch of great people hanging out that were always there for each other, were generally buddies. It was a pretty large group of people, and I looked forward to it, but it was never the cool thing to do. I chose to go with what I deemed to be the cooler group of people. Problem about that was a lot of this hanging out was giving each other shit. Now I'm not going to say that there's a problem with friends giving each other shit, with a bit of banter going back and forth, ragging on each other, giving each other a hard time. That's what mates do, and I did it with my other group as well. But what I found with this particular group was they would typically focus on a couple of people in that group and go all in on them. Throughout this whole time we were doing this, I don't think anyone ever asked that target, hey, sorry about that, or is this cool, or are you okay with this? Because my mentality growing up was, feelings are lame, you put up with it. That's just what, being a guy going through school was. The problem with this was, eventually one of the guys we'd pick on would actually get a bit emotional about it. And he would then openly tell us to shut the fuck up while tears were in his eyes. And that group's reaction was to fucking laugh at him hard and give him shit for that. We basically created a culture with these guys that feelings are lame. It's funny as hell to pick on one of your friends until he cries. It didn't matter if he was okay or not. At the time, as I say this, I'm thinking, this is fucking disgusting. This is awful behavior and this is an awful way to treat someone. But unfortunately, I was part of that group and I said and did nothing. Now, hand on heart, I can honestly say I was never one of those people that brought someone to tears and then gave him shit for putting him to tears. But I can also say, unfortunately, when that happened, I didn't do anything to stop it. I was on the part that also copped it quite a bit, and I was always given ridicule, I was always given shit. Eventually, I would just give up and just walk away. And when they asked what was up, I said nothing. I just said I would make up some lie that I had something else to do. And I just never wanted to admit that there was a problem. I got to the point that I walked away from my friends, but couldn't even think to tell them why. Now, thankfully, towards the end of our school life, things got better. But unfortunately, what I've learnt is once that damage gets done at a young age, early adulthood, we're all going out, having a good time. We go out basically 2 to 3 times a week, every week for years and years and years, while rocking up, hungover as hell, going to work. And, life is great. I'm that outgoing, loud party guy that's always going out and creating a ruckus. Then comes a stage where, once again, the group realizes it's fun to give each other shit. And again, it's always banter, it's mates giving each other a bit of back and forward. For the most part, it's pretty innocent, pretty harmless, and everyone gives it to each other pretty evenly. But unfortunately, during this stage, I've realised that I started putting on a little bit of weight because I was doing no exercise, drinking, honestly, 4 or 5 nights a week, waking up hungover as shit, too hungover to do anything, and then eating garbage food before going out again that night. With this, I started putting on a lot of weight, and it didn't go unnoticed. And the odd comment here or there, honestly, probably welcome in the world of banter. Unfortunately, once it became the funny point of conversation for a long, long time, I was always just known as that fat guy that got drunk and was a piece of shit. I got this a lot. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these people were the same group of people from my earlier story, but also other people that had joined the group got in on it. Now, I want to make it very clear, not all of these friends have always been like this. It's mainly a collection of a few, but unfortunately they were always the loudest voices. Once again, I was the primary subject of ridicule, at least that's how it felt to me. If I'm wrong, who knows, it could have been an even spread, but to me it definitely felt like I was that primary subject. And once again, I started feeling like shit hanging out with my friends. And the way I thought I'd handle that is by writing passive-aggressive, not actually trying to prove a point, statuses on Facebook, and then when they would ask if everything's okay, I would just reply with, yeah, nah, it's fine, don't worry about it. So my logic for dealing with that was to basically vent to no one, do nothing about it, and then continue living that exact same life, treating my body like that. Thankfully, eventually got to a point that one of my friends, she did notice that this stuff was actually getting to me. She apologized to me up front. She noticed how bad it got. I really did take that apology sincerely because I could tell that she never realized how bad it was getting until that point. I don't know if she spoke to the rest of the group, but what I do know is after she apologized, it pretty well stopped. So going so long through life as what I felt to be as a subject of ridicule from people I thought very highly of, this led to me realizing that I had a very, very low case of self-esteem. The main thing I always realized was anytime I would actively express myself, I would be a lesser person for it. Every time I feel like I would show any emotion or say how I feel, I'd get knocked down. So I would do things that were ultimately not harming other people, and then I'd get picked on for it, and then I wouldn't feel comfortable with saying or doing anything about it. Unfortunately, this went far beyond just me standing up for myself. It went to me ever wanting to express myself with anything ever. I say what I like. I say what I feel good about. I say how I feel. In my head, I say I like something. I then get made fun of for it, and then I wouldn't know how to defend myself, because whenever I tried to express myself, I'd get made fun of worse. And to me, that was just an endless spiral of me feeling like shit. This actually led to this happy, loud, outgoing person that was always doing stuff, getting people to do stuff, always going out, always having a good time, was actually a guy that never fucking opened up for years and years and years, unless he was already in a miserable state. Then things got worse. The hardest moment of my life. When I was 21, my mum passed away of cancer. She was 51 years old, just celebrated her 51st birthday, and just weeks before my 22nd birthday. Now, obviously, that fucked me up. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. The way that made me feel, I could never imagine feeling any worse. I still, to this day, vividly remember the night she passed away, not knowing that that was going to be the night it happened. I went to visit her in hospital because she had a bad couple of days before that, so she was in and out of between hospital and home for a few months, and she was at a stage where she was in hospital and her body deteriorated in a crazy short amount of time. So me and my partner at the time went to go visit her that night, and I could barely look at her, could barely say any words without just losing it. I stayed there for as long as I could. I had as much of a time with her as I could possibly. And when we finally left, all I could say was, that was the hardest moment of my life. Little did I know that 6 hours later, she would pass away. Now, I'm going to be very, very clear here. My friends during this time were amazing. This same group of people that you might think I've been spending this whole time ragging on were incredible. They were there for me through every moment. They all came to see me and my family to check up how we were, and they went to the funeral, they stayed at the wake, and they did everything they could do for my family, and I'll always be thankful for that. I'll always appreciate that. This part isn't about them. Honestly, who knows how bad it could have been without them. This part was the fact that I had no idea how to deal with this. I spent so long of my life hiding that negative emotion that I refused to even think that there was something I could or should have done at this stage. I never even entertained the thought of seeing a grief counsellor. I took a very short amount of time off work, and by, I reckon, within a week, I started going out again with mates. And when I say going out, I don't mean, going to someone's house to watch the footy. I mean going out. I did all this very, very quickly, because in my head, I'm like, I'm not a sad, upset guy. I got to be this happy guy, so I just went out and did it. Show how fucked up that is. I viewed in my head that me continuing to be upset about my mum passing away at such a young age, I viewed it as weakness to admit that that was sad. Now, obviously, I was a blubbering mess for over a week afterwards of just being inconsolable. But in my head, I still thought that I had to be the happy guy. And yeah, years down the line, I never even realized that that's what I did until I spoke to Kat about this. And she's like, after I explained the whole story, the only thing she replied with was, and you guys didn't see a grief counsellor about it? Because I didn't know that was the thing to do. Because in my head, emotions were bad. All I had to be was happy. So I didn't know that that was the thing to feel, and that was a way to react. And to this day, I've realised I've never truly dealt with it properly. And even now, just thinking and talking about it, I can talk about it comfortably. But at the same time, as I'm talking, I have no idea where I'm going to go with it, because I've never dealt with it properly. And again, this part here is me just highlighting just how little I understood emotions, because I lived my life thinking I wasn't allowed to express them. But the problem with this is I rushed to the finish line to feel better, which is what led to self-destruction. I would go out all the time. I'm saying there was a stage of my life that I'd be waking up hungover more mornings than I wake up feeling fine, because I'd be going out 4 to 5 nights a week without fail. And it was fun, I'm not gonna lie, I had a great time. But the problem with doing this was I was only ever putting my body through shit. When I wake up, I would wake up a lot of those mornings feeling genuinely depressed as fuck. I would wake up thinking, what is the fucking point of doing any of this? I'm going out having a good time, but I'm actually not enjoying any aspect of my life anymore. I thought that's just the hangover talking. That's just me coming down from a wild night on the piss. Even if that were the case, that is not a normal way to think. But even if you could actually argue that I was only feeling that way because I was hungover, then why was I allowing myself to wake up feeling that way more mornings than not? Why was it in my head okay to spend over half my mornings of, those years of my life wondering why am I even alive? I would feel like absolute shit. And of course, my solution to that was eat a bunch of shitty food, go out, get drunk again, and do it all over again. And eventually this led to me becoming a guy that was very overweight, very unhealthy, and on the outset, at that point in time, pretty fucking unhappy, which ultimately came to a head within the last year where I decided to finally do something about that and make myself better. Development and denial. You guys already have hopefully seen my last few videos about the steps I took in the last year to lose that weight that I put on, live a much healthier life, and overall become a happier person. When I was first going through this whole stage for the first, I will be honest, probably 7 months, despite all that stuff I've just gone through, at no stage in my head did I realize that mental health was another thing I had to work on. I'm talking like March, April, I was still in my head the guy that never knew how to show emotion, never knew how to deal with my problems, and the moment any issue came up, the only way to deal with that issue was to race to the finish line and things be happy again. No matter what it took to get there, things were meant to be good, which sounds great until you actually think about that I still had no idea how to deal with what I was feeling, no idea how to deal with myself. That unfortunately led to rock bottom. In January, at work, things got a bit tough to the point that through all the shit that was going on with work, I just added it to the pile. I had more and more issues coming up at work than I had feeling good, and my only response was to make that shit worse. This all came to a head in January where I, without getting into too much detail, my attitude almost got me fired. I almost lost my job because of how toxic I became. I still, at this point in time, refuse to accept that I had a problem with dealing with things. After that talk at work, I actually did have a new approach at work, and to be honest, sort of took me on a better path and things are better at work now, things are great. However, I still never really learned how to deal with these problems. This led to when me and Kat were in the process of planning our wedding, what is ultimately meant to be one of the most exciting, happiest moments of our life, led to a little bit of a fight, which honestly itself is fine. But in my head, I was thinking, holy fuck, I fucked this up. What have I done? What have I said? Is this over? That makes no sense. We're literally in the conversations of our forever, and I'm still thinking I found a way to fuck this up to the point that she's going to leave. That is how low my self-esteem was at this stage. This is how little I understood my own emotions right now. After this fight, we had a couple days of very weird tepidness, which eventually we did get past. But again, I never really dealt with my problems. And then this led to us having a bit of a running gag with each other at a night out we had with our parents. This gag eventually made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. When I started expressing my mind on that, again, that spiraled into me, got me to the point that I started snapping, and to the point that I realized once again in my head that I fucked this whole thing up. The way I've acted is wrong and she's going to leave me. I literally fell to the floor yelling, "What can I do?" Literally crouching down, hands in my head, screaming, "What can I fucking do?" Seconds after this happened, I'm like, what the fuck was that? Like, for a moment, I just separated myself from myself. I'm like, who was that? What just happened? That made no fucking sense. Kat was basically speechless. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, how did we get to here? And I'm like, how the fuck are we here? And it was at that point that we actually finally realized that all of these things in my life have all added up to this exact point where I had a problem. Acceptance and tipping point. That was probably the lowest I'd ever felt in my life. As weird as it is to say, that was also probably one of the most important moments of my life. because that was when we realized that I needed to do something about it. We talked it out. We went through all of these moments that I've shared with you today, all of these problems that I went through. We realized that there was a pattern as to why I was reacting the way I was reacting to all these times. We eventually realized that I never knew how to deal with my emotions. My entire life, 29 years, I never learnt how to deal with my emotions, which led to me doing something about it. Rebuilding and reclaiming. Next morning, I'm calling up my GP and asking to go on a mental health plan. It was, at that point in time, one of the hardest things to admit, one of the hardest things to do. I had to admit that I was at an all-time low. Once I've done it, it was by far the greatest thing I've ever done. I went in and saw my GP. He asked me a series of questions, basically to realize if I was having more of an issue with depression, anxiety, or stress. Of those three, I was low in the depression, which at the time was a bit surprising, but very high with stress and anxiety. This led to him giving me a referral to see a psychologist, where a week after that, I came in and saw the psychologist. I came in, did basically the exact same test, but with a lot more refined to really figure out where things were. And I sat down and began what was, honestly, at the beginning, a very weird conversation. I don't want to go into too much detail about a psychologist, but they don't do a lot of talking. It's mostly you talking to them and then feeding what they read of that back into you with a bit of advice. I'm not going into the specifics of it. I might do that in another video. But basically what we did was he worked out a few of the things that he believed were causing me problems and gave me a very, very easy to do list of solutions. I mean easy to do as in I started this change that night. There was a lot of recurring themes of what was a cause of my stress and anxiety. But because luckily for me, there was a few recurring themes that triggered these, I was able to really try and smash them out as quickly as I could. Saw him again 2 weeks later, and the first chunk of it was me reflecting that first visit and what I learned, what those 2 weeks were. We then went into a little bit more about my life and my problems and what else I could work on and other things that I could do. It was during this time that I had already started realizing after 2 weeks how much better I was feeling. It was actually during this time that I realized that these videos were something that I wanted to do. I felt so good about myself, finally, after 29 fucking years, that I felt like I could finally express how I felt about things. I finally felt like I was able to talk about me and how I feel and not care about ridicule or repercussions. And it was great. And that was basically right before I wanted to work on this. I booked one more appointment. 1 month later. Day of that third appointment was also the day I put up my first video. I came in almost a month and a half after my first ever appointment and sat with him for one last time, talking about everything we went through, talking about how my last month has been, talking about what I've noticed, talking about what I've done, and finally talking about what I'm going to be doing. And he ended it by saying how much change he saw in me in 3 visits. How different the guy that stood in front of him was now compared to the guy that came in all those weeks ago. He asked what my plans were and I told him about these videos and I said, we're going to see how it goes. When my first appointment ended, the only thing on my mind was when can I book in to see him again. This last one I ended open. I hadn't even booked the next appointment yet. I had no desire or feel like I needed to go and see him again, and he felt like I didn't need to come see him again anytime soon. Now, this isn't going to say that I'm done with this. I'm far from it. I'm far from done with seeing this psych about this. I'm looking forward to seeing him again. In fact, the only thing we said was maybe I should book an appointment when I'm done with these videos to see how far I've come in that time since. That brings me to today. Today I stand before you as a guy who, for the first time in his entire life, feels comfortable expressing how he feels at his most raw and personal level without worrying about there being any negative repercussion or ridicule. 2 months ago, I would never have even dreamed of the idea of putting myself out there, and I've been talking to you guys now for after this video will be well over an hour about my life, the ins and outs. And as this video itself shows, some of my rawest feelings I've gone through in my life. I'm probably the happiest I've ever been. Now, I'm not done with therapy. I'm far from being perfect and I'm far from being cured. I still now have those days where I feel like I'm an absolute fuck up who can throw everything away just like that. Those days are a lot further apart. And the biggest thing is I actually finally understand those emotions for the first time in my life. I finally understand where this guy is coming from. This is the happiest I've ever been. Those steps, those 3 big changes are the key. So what's next? Tomorrow. Well guys, this is the 4th of my series of 4 videos that I said I was going to make. When I said I was going to do this, I had no idea what I was actually going to be like doing this. I had no idea how I was going to feel about doing it. What I can honestly say is I've loved the hell out of these videos. Editing is still a bitch. But this is by far the most fun I've had doing a personal project in my life. And by far, this is the most confident I've ever felt about myself. I don't have any immediate follow-up videos planned per se, but what I do know for sure is I'm not done making these videos. This series of 4 is now done, but what I do know is I will be working a lot more, talking about a lot more things that matter to me. Honestly, I just scraped the surface about my own mental health issues in this video. I've already realized talking to friends about this, how much I love the idea of talking about this more and more, how much more I want to put a focus on this problem. Because yes, everyone knows that mental health is a big problem, but at the same time, I don't think there can be too many people talking about this. I really want to get that conversation started with anyone that will listen, because if there's this one person who doesn't realize how much help they actually need, that suddenly realizes, hey, this could be me. But yeah, if there's this one fucking person who has now realized my mate's acting different, I really should ask if he's okay and do something about it, then this whole fucking thing has been worth it. And now that I've not completed my personal journey, but I feel like I've come such a long way in my personal journey, my next step is now only going to be about trying to make things better for other people any way I can. And if this output can do that, then I couldn't be more happy with what I've done. All I'm saying is there is nothing wrong with realizing you have a problem, and there is nothing wrong with making sure your friends, your loved ones are okay. Please help each other. Thank you guys. I'm wrapping this up now. This has been a wild ride. I can't believe I've done this. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.